So I went in there and we found the lieutenant, and I said, "Lieutenant, can you cold drill?" He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Can you drill a hole in that barge, deck that barge, keep spraying WD-40 on it so nothing hot drops down there in case you think it's fuel down below. But I'm telling you, it's not fuel." He has 6 fuel tanks in that barge. I had seen all 6 of those fuel tanks.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell him how I knew, except Ray said, "Listen, Lieutenant, you need to listen to him. He knows what he's talking about." He goes, "So you're saying the barge is not full of fuel?"
Welcome to Creepalachia. We have a very intriguing and I always call it depressingly fun. I don't know. When former investigators come in, law enforcement, I always just get giddy with excitement because I respect your all's position so much. But Dr. Norman Wood is here. You've lived about 4 lifetimes. How many?
I've run out of I've only had 7 lives, and I've used up about 6 of those.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I'm glad I caught you on the tail end. So let's go ahead and talk about you and where you grew up first. That's how we typically like to start. So tell me about yourself.
Yeah, I grew up in Moundsville. Went to John Marshall High School. Graduated 73. Became an iron worker, helped build the I-470 bridge across the Ohio River. Did that for a few years. Then was in construction for a couple years around the state. And then after that, I joined the state police in 77.
Heck yeah. So what's the qualifications to be a state policeman? Can diabetics join? I've always been curious.
I'm not sure about the medical part, if you can be a diabetic or not, because I'm sure the criteria probably has changed since I have been in there.
Right.
77,
they was like, "Are you breathing?" Check. Okay. Can you do 7.5 push-ups? All right.
It was a lot of physical stuff.
Right.
Yeah. It was a lot of physical stuff to get into the academy. And then you had to go through your interview process.
Right. So what was the physical test to get in?
Well, you had to do timed stuff. Obviously it was timed, and they had the criteria. You had to do so many push-ups, so many setups, that type of stuff, pull-ups, run, all that type of stuff. Yeah. The normal physical stuff that you would do.
Sure. Good deal. How many, is it called cadets?
Yes, cadets.
Okay. How many was in your class?
We were the 31st cadet class, and I ended up being the outstanding cadet. And I think we graduated 27, what we graduated.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of cars did they have back then? Like they're always Fords now, it seems like.
We had Dodge.
Okay.
When I first came out, they still had the old 440s. They would fly, but their suspension was like a baby carriage. I really didn't care much for them. And then in 79, I got a Dodge Newport at 360. It was a pretty nice car. And then after that, they got the Dodge Diplomats, and those, they weren't worth a crap.
Right.
And then after that, I'm not sure what they went through, but probably the nicest car I had was a 79 Dodge Newport.
Did you ever pull any pit maneuvers?
No.
Never had to?
Never had to.
Yeah. Did they train you on how to do that?
Well, they didn't then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they didn't then. I'm not sure what they do now with their driving instructor. And at one time, I was the CIA driving instructor at Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. We definitely did pits down there.
Wow. Like the CIA?
Correct.
Okay. So Central Intelligence Agency, for those out there who have been under a rock for 60 years. Well, that's fun.
Yeah.
So how does the CIA work with the state police? I never really realized that.
Well, that was after I left the state police. I left the state police in 85.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
And I was recruited out of Fairmont State to go to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia as an instructor. So that's actually how I started in the federal government. Then after that, I was asked to go to San Francisco.
Wow. Okay. Just a boy from Moundsville.
Just country boy from Fish Creek.
That's right. Oh, you say Creek. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your state police career. So how many years total was that?
8.
Okay. So 8 years. Do they kind of just start you out like, okay, go sit on the interstate for like 2 years and then don't move and try to see what you can find?
Obviously, there's some cadets that are sent to the turnpike or the interstate, but most of them are not. Most of them are sent out to the detachments. My first 4 years was at the Philippi detachment. So, we handled everything, all the road laws, all the criminal investigation, all of the road fatalities had to be investigated by the state police. And we had a bunch. I have taken over 40 dead people out of cars, 8 one weekend.
Wow.
Yeah, that's one part of the job. I don't miss that at all.
That sucks. I mean, and because like me, I've seen like maybe one dead body and it was like an old person. Now I've been to funerals and stuff, but you go literally.
Yeah, it's entirely different. When you see them as in law enforcement or as a medic, EMS, fire departments, we all see the same type of stuff, and it's not pretty. Sometimes you got to walk around with a plastic bag and pick up body parts.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Now, Philippi, for those who don't know, got a beautiful covered bridge, and you got some mummies down there. I don't know if you know about that, but you got the mummies in the museum. Well, so if you're out there in Philippi, do not wreck your car. Go see the mummies. Much rather do that. So what is the process for a car wreck? I'm really interested in, like, did you have a certain protocol or did you assess the scene or
everything?
Okay.
Everything. If you're in charge of an accident, first thing you want to do is make sure nobody else gets hurt, right? Mm-hmm. First thing you want to determine if somebody is injured in the accident and get them help. That's number one. And then you try to do that while, you're making sure the traffic's still flowing. And if you can't do that, you just have to make them set until you get things taken care of.
Yeah. You said 8 in one weekend. What were people doing? Was this like 4th of July or something? Or
No. Four of the boys were PA students from Broaddus College.
Oh, wow.
They were up at Kingwood. They had been, I think, kayaking. They were on the way back down. And some things you never forget. The boy's name that was driving was Norman Todd Johnson from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Some things you never forget. And they had 0 blood alcohol. They weren't drinking. They weren't doing drugs. But Norm had his head up his butt, hit a school bus head on, killed all 4 of them.
Oh, my goodness. That's terrifying. How long ago was that?
That would have been
early 80s?
Yeah, probably 79, 80, 81, through there somewhere. His father flew in from Oklahoma. He wanted to see where his son was killed, so I took him out there and showed him where it happened.
What was that like? Talking to parents, I'd say that's the worst.
It's not good. It's not good. When you have to do a death notification, it's always horrible. Horrible.
Yeah. Do you have like a script that you go by, or you just never know what you're going to say?
No, you just go do what has to be done.
Yeah. So what was the typical call in West Virginia in the late 70s, early 80s? I mean, were drugs really a thing then? Or
we had some drugs, fights, that type of stuff. Had some B&Es. We had some robberies. I broke up a burglary ring, and me and another trooper named John Jeffries. John has passed away. But we broke that ring, and we had, I think, 63 felony indictments in one term of the Barber County Grand Jury.
Goodness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were all over there for several weeks once we started rounding up those guys.
Right. Do you, like, on something like that, do you just get one and try to make them flip on the other and then kind of work your way down, or you just...
And you never know how it's going to work out.
Right.
You just never know how it's going to work out. You don't know who you're going to get first, and you may get several at the same time, and it doesn't. You just never know. You just got to play it by ear. That's the thing about being in law enforcement. Nothing is scripted. Nothing is scripted, and you're not worth a crap until you got about 5 years in. After about 5 years, then you know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's kind of. I mean, it's nothing like making videos, but I always heard, your first 50 videos are going to suck. You got to get it. You got to make them though, because eventually they're going to get better. So it's that's how I relate to it. I've done nothing with a firearm ever, so I just I do love the position so much. I don't know if you know. Do you know Tim Bledsoe?
I don't think so.
Okay, well he was state police investigator down here, and he's a buddy of mine, but he's retired now. But I always love these episodes. So how does the state police work with the prosecution office? Like when a warrant comes down, I don't think a lot of people understand the basic process of how this stuff works. So are there multiple ways that can occur, or?
Yes, there is. But the normal way that happens is a crime is committed. Whoever has that crime committed against them, they call the state police, sheriff's department, or whoever. Now, the prosecuting attorney for each county is the lead law enforcement officer in that county. So he determines what is going to be prosecuted. He determines what he's going to take to the grand jury. So as a state trooper, if there was a burglary or something, we would investigate it. Then we would take all of that information, our reports and stuff, whether we made an arrest or not. All of that would go to the prosecuting attorney, and then he would decide how he wanted to handle it.
Gotcha. Did you ever get shut down? Like, well, I don't know, Norman, this one kind of never did. Look at you.
No.
Let's go. So,
no, never.
Yeah. Well, that's good because, there's been a couple times in here recently, actually, where an arrest warrant was given and then it ended up getting dropped by the prosecutor. And
you got to do it right.
Yeah.
You can't be shortcutting anything. You have to do everything right. You have to have that probable cause for that arrest warrant, and you have to do it right. Or the prosecuting attorney, if he looks at it, if he thinks it's trash, he's going to toss it.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's his responsibility. And this is important for the listeners. We're not out there to convict or harass good people. We're out there to get the criminals who's preying on the good people. So you want to make sure that what you're doing is correct.
Sure. Yeah. And there's this thing called the Constitution, and the prosecutor's like, well, this kind of violates it, so we got to throw that one out. But that's a big deal to be there for that many years and never have one thrown out. So it definitely shows you took it serious. And then the indictment process. So some people get real frustrated because they'll have someone arrested and then there won't be an indictment drop or an indictment be filed until a certain time of the year. But I try to explain to people, like, there's only like 3 or 4 times a year that the grand jury meets.
That's true.
Yeah. And then
that's true. Yes. The grand jury has to be in session, and then everything will be presented by the prosecuting attorney, and he may call in me, and I've had to testify before grand juries and tell them our side. And they only hear the prosecution side. They don't hear the defendant's side in a grand jury. They're there to determine if there's probable cause to make that arrest and then to return a true bill. If they return a true bill, then that goes to trial.
Got it.
And if a warrant has not been issued up to that point, a warrant is issued and they're arrested.
Right. Yeah. Which has happened a few times too, because people will sit around and be like, why is nothing happening? And I'm like, well, indictments aren't until so-and-so month, because all the counties are different too. People don't realize that. Like, they all have a different schedule. Mm-hmm. So
yes. And you have to go by the circumstance of, if something is not actionable to me as that I have to go out there and I have to arrest somebody, but I think they've committed a crime, then they will not be arrested. And then all that information would go to the prosecuting attorney, and then he would take all that information before the grand jury and let the grand jury decide if there's enough information there, if there's enough probable cause to issue a warrant for that person.
Yeah. And so the state police's job, correct me if I'm wrong, is to essentially ensure the law gets followed. And then when it comes to indicting, bond, all of those things, that's up to the judge and then the prosecutor. And then you're kind of like, okay, well, I'm here if you need me to give my testimony on what happened.
The cops and any department, whether state police, sheriff's department, city, doesn't make any difference. They do the legwork. They're the ground soldiers. They're the foot soldiers. They're out there collecting the evidence. If they have to, they make the arrest. Then they take all of that information back to their prosecuting attorney, and he determines what he wants to do with it.
Heck yeah. Did you enjoy the state police?
Oh, I loved it. Great bunch of guys. Yeah. One of the finest times in my life. And I've been fortunate enough to do a bunch, but I'm still close with all the troops that I worked with. We're all still brothers.
Y'all get together, play golf, anything like that?
Well, some of us have. I'd been gone for so long. I'd been on the West Coast for a number of years, and then I just came back in 2019.
Did the Hills call you back? I know a lot.
Oh, yes, they did.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, they did.
I just miss it. Like, I know I'm never going to move. I couldn't imagine living outside of them.
And I have lived in Kirksville, Missouri, Houston, Texas, San Francisco, Napa, California, Coos Bay, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington. So I've been in the big cities, and I've not only lived there, I worked in them. Most people didn't know who I was. I didn't even go by my real name. My name was Tony Davis.
Nice.
In my books, my name is Nathan West, and that's why they're going to call the TV series West.
How cool. Yeah, you was telling me about a TV series, so there's kind of some pre-production going on.
Yes.
Now, what exactly is that? Is it about certain stories involving your life?
Yes.
Okay.
It follows my career as a special agent. Actually, the pilot is going to start in a church in Coos Bay, Oregon, St. Monica's Church, where I was with another agent. And that's when I decided to leave the government. And that was in 92, early 92. But when I left the state police in 85, and then I was recruited out of college just before graduation in 86. I finished my Bachelor of Criminology, Bachelor of Science in Criminology and Psychology. And then I was recruited out of Fairmont State. And I was asked to go to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia as an instructor. So I did that. And I was down there, and I had to go through what he called the program. The guy's name was Buddy Harris. Buddy Hayden in the book, his real name is Buddy Harris. But he was the recruiter. And he got me down there, and he ran me through a bunch of things that he had designed to see how well his interns would do in the field for what we would have to do then. And it follows up those books you'll read all about in those books.
Shoot, yeah. We got Thorn, the Red Sword book series, book 2, and then we got Red Sword, which is book 1.
Yes.
Pretty epic covers. Some Tom Clancy looking stuff.
Yes, and what that's about is, and it's true, you can't make this stuff up. The Russian military and the Russian KGB was wanting to eliminate Mikhail Gorbachev, General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev. They had a planned coup in 1989. We found out about it, and they were going to try to bring 100 tons of narcotics into San Francisco to make their money. They wanted to make $100 million, and they had to have that $100 million to bribe the Russian generals so they would participate in the coup in 89. And there was just so much corruption. That's just the way it was over there. If you had enough money, you could get an army to do whatever the hell you wanted to do.
Sure.
Well, General Vorenikov, he was in charge of Afghanistan, and he was one of the leaders of Red Sword. They called their group Red Sword. And he decided to, with some KGB officers, to smuggle Afghan hashish into the United States, tons and tons and tons of it. So they brought in the first load in 87. They brought in about 47 tons.
Golly.
47 tons. And then, but they were still in Afghanistan, and we had to wait until they were ready to leave Afghanistan before we could really do what we needed to do. So I was undercover for about 2 years. My undercover name was Tony Davis, and that's all I went by. I lied to everybody every day about everything. And that was my life. That was my life for a long time.
Dude, did you get married?
Yes, I was married.
Wow. Was. Keyword?
Was.
Okay, got it. I was going to say that would have to be stressful.
Oh, I couldn't tell anybody where I was, what I was doing for months and months. It would be 3 months go by and I wouldn't even be talking to her. That type of stuff.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because when you're undercover, if you've got to be that person. And I became that person. And that was one of the reasons I just finally just said, I'm done. In St. Monica's Church, I told Ralph Del Pret, I said, I'm done. I'm tired of lying to everybody every day about everything. And I even told him, I said, my real name's not Tony Davis. He said, what? I said, it's Norman Wood, but in the book it says it's Nathan West. But he goes, God bless you. He goes, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to go back home, go back to West Virginia. What are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go to med school. So that's when I came back, went to med school.
Dude, that's so amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to back up a little bit. So let's go through the transition from the state police. I did want to ask, like, did you investigate murders or any certain things in the state police?
Oh, yes.
Is that now they have a specific unit for that, right? Like they have, no, it's just any state police.
It's who's in charge of that detachment handles it. If we want somebody else to come in and do some more investigation, they may call in BCI or something like that. But normally it's just the field troops that do all that murder investigations. Yeah.
Gotcha. And I know they have like the fancy van that has all the different testing supplies. Did they have that?
Yeah, they have a mobile lab, where they can collect. And that's a lot of times what they do now. Back then that we didn't have that. Back then we collected all the evidence. And I've got a good story about that.
Oh, let's do it.
I got a good story about evidence. There was a young girl that was raped in Barber County.
Bad start so far.
Bad start.
Yeah, that's awful.
This guy was raping 2 or 3 women a day.
Jeez.
And they called him the interstate rapist. And this was back in, my God, when was this? This had to have been, I think, 78, 79.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, over Route 57, we got a call there at the state police office, and the corporal told me to go out there and take care of it. So I went out there and I interviewed the girl and asked him, what did he say and what did he look like? And he was short and not very heavy, had reddish brown hair. And he knocked on the door, said he was working for the gas company or the power line people, and he was walking the line. He needed to use the telephone. So she let him in. So he thumbed through the phone book. And then he acted like he was calling somebody. And then he pulled it was actually a starter pistol out of his pocket and took her back to the bedroom and raped her with that gun. On his way out, he wiped everything off that he touched before he left. And he did this for, I want to say, probably almost one whole summer before he went to Barber County. And what I did, I asked the lady, what exactly did he do? And she told me. So I took everything that he touched, and there was no prints on nothing, except on page 18, I got a left thumbprint of the phone book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I took the girls. There was a very good artist up in Elkins, which was my company headquarters at the time. It was headquarters of Company C. And Bob Alcar. Bob was one of the officers up there, and he knew this artist. So I had Bobby get her to the state police office, and I took my victim plus 2 other victims from around the Clarksburg area, took them up to the state police office there in Elkins, and I set each girl down with the artist by themselves, nobody else in the room, and she would draw from their memory. So when we finished, we took all 3 sketches, and we laid them on the table, and we asked all 3 of the victims which sketch is the best, and they all pointed at that one. So I took that sketch and I circulated it. Well, I got ahead of myself.
Oh, take your time.
After I did that, I started going back through all of the neighborhoods that were adjoining where this woman lived down on Route 57 in Barber County. And I went all through the countryside and I knocked on one door, and it was an elderly lady. And I said, and I had the sketch. I said, did you see this guy? Did he come knock on your door? Yeah, it looks like the guy that was driving that Dodge Omni. I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, I used to have a white and purple Dodge Omni exactly like that, and he had one. So I not only had the sketch, but I had his vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So I circulated that through all of the state police offices, detachments, the sheriff's department, city police departments, all up and down the interstate. And there was a city policeman over in Weston, West Virginia. He looked at that flyer, looked at the sketch, looked at that car, and said, that looks like Kenny Drew Sayers. And he goes, matter of fact, we got a check warrant for him. So they arrested him, brought him in. They had a lineup, and the girls picked him out. That's how we solved that case.
Let's go.
And nobody, he raped, I want to say he raped like 20-some women.
Jeez.
And nobody had any physical evidence for court. But after we caught him, we matched his fingerprint to page 18 in my victim's house. So we had the physical evidence. He was in that house, and that pretty much put the nail in his coffin.
How many did he get charged with? Probably not all of them.
He was charged with all of them.
Really?
Yeah, because they picked him out of the lineup.
Right.
They picked him out of the lineup. So all of the girls picked him out of the lineup. And then my case was in the one where we actually had physical evidence in the case, but it put the nail in his coffin. He went to prison. I'm not sure if he served the rest of his life or not, but he was in there quite some time.
Goodness.
He was just one of them crazy people.
Did you ever, you mentioned Weston, did you ever arrest anyone that was like sent to Trans-Allegheny, the lunatic asylum there? Or I'm just curious if you ever remember anything.
Well, they closed that in what, 94, 95?
95, yep.
Yep, 94, 95. There was a guy in Barber County. His name was Bobby. And he had served in Vietnam. He came back just all whacked out. And clean-cut guy. He'd always dressed clean, that type of stuff. And the first time I met Bobby, I was in Philippi maybe a week. And I was in my personal car. I had a Cherokee. Saw this guy thumbing, going up the hills. I'll give him a ride. He got in the car. And we went up and going up the hill out of Philippi towards the state police office that was up there on top of the hill before the high school. And I asked him what he did, and he goes, "I'm a writer." And I said, "Well, that's pretty cool." I said, "What are you writing? What are you working on?" He goes, "Well, I'm working on a tribute to Elvis. Elvis had recently died."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "That's pretty cool." He goes, "Yeah, I wrote the national anthem." And then the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I'm looking at him.
You're like, uh-oh.
and so I pull into the state police office. I say, I'll be right back. I got to go in here and get a pamphlet. Because I didn't tell him I was a trooper.
Right.
I was in jeans and T-shirt. And I walked in there, and Corporal Bob Elkins, he was sitting back in his office. And I said, "Who the hell is Bobby? Da-da-da."
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "Why?" I said, "I got him out here in my car." He goes, "He is crazier than hell." I said, "Is he dangerous?" He says, "No, he's not dangerous." So anyway, I knew Bobby for the 4 years I was at Philippi, and I'd pick him up. I'd take him to lunch. I'd give him money. I'd see him hitchhiking. I'd pick him up. I'd give him a ride from Philippi to Belington. He lived in Belington. And then I was getting ready to transfer up to Moundsville, 82. Actually, I was going to Wetzel County, 100 detachment. And that was in 82. And I was driving into Belington, and I was leaving that weekend. And Bobby was on he was heading north on US Route 250, and he saw my cruiser, and he just flipped me the bird. And you could see he was screaming. He flipped me the bird. I'm like, "What the hell's going on with Bobby?" So I turned around and went back, and I said, "Bobby, what's going on?" He just madder than hell.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just cussing. And he said, "They stole my song." I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I was writing this song. They stole my song." I said, who stole it? He goes, "I don't know." But he goes, "You got to find out who they are." I said, "All right, I'll find out who they are." I said, "How do you know they stole it?" He goes, "I heard it on the radio."
Oh, nice.
So I said, "Okay, Bobby." I said, "You be all right." I said, "You okay, Bobby?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm fine." So anyway, so I left and went on back out to my place. Like I said, I was moving that weekend, and I called the detachment when I got home and talked to Bob Elkins again, Corporal Elkins. I said, "Man, you got to watch Bobby. He's flipping out. Something bad's going to happen with him." And I'd never seen Bobby like that in 4 years. That weekend, he beat his mother to death with a ball bat.
No way.
Yeah, way. Yeah. She wouldn't let him use the car. He beat her to death with a ball bat. So you just never know when these people are going to take off on you. You just never know. And those are the personalities that you learn to deal with the whole time.
That sounds, and it sounds like it started out like, well, he's pretty entertaining. Let me just help him out, and kind of we'll have some funny conversations. And then that's what always scares me. I always think about that of like, it just takes one time.
Yeah. You don't know what's going to flip them off. You don't know.
Goodness.
And as a physician, and during my training, I did a lot of work down at the Catawba State Hospital in Virginia, down near Salem. And that was a lot of the criminally insane that they hold in one section of that state hospital. Fascinating.
Oh, no doubt.
You would sit down and you could carry on a conversation with the person, and they'd be like me and you talking.
Mm-hmm.
You would have no idea. If you weren't a trained observer, you would have no idea. And those people are out there walking around our streets now, because that's one of the things West Virginia has to get back to. We have to get back in New State Hospital because, and I'll explain that to you as well.
Sure.
And it has to go, and it goes with the drug overdose and the drug overdose death. And we can now prove that it takes the brain up to 1.5 to 2 years to recover after abstinence from narcotics. That's the reason these 30-day drug rehab clinics never work. they'll never work. The brain doesn't have time to even start to heal. It takes the brain on an average of 15 weeks to even start to recover after abstinence from drug addiction. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a long process.
Oh, I could imagine.
And we have no place to hold those people while we can do that.
Well, the whole lobotomy thing kind of screwed it up for everybody.
Well, it did. And the other thing is, back in the 80s, we had approximately and I'm the former physician director of the West Virginia Division of Corrections Rehabilitation. I did that as well.
Wow, dude, what have you not done? That's my question.
I'm running out of options. Yeah. But anyway, so back in the 80s, when I was a trooper, we had about 2,000 inmates. Mm-hmm. When the opioid epidemic took off, 80s, 90s, 2000, we now are up to 12,000 inmates. We just continue to build prisons, and we can't. And I keep telling everybody, and I didn't know this as a cop. I learned this as a doctor, and I've been a doctor now for almost 30 years. And I helped run the urgent care clinics out in Seattle. We had 14 urgent care clinics in Seattle that I helped run, and we had a homeless population of 8,000 that we were dealing with in Seattle.
Sure.
In all of West Virginia, there's only about 1,500, maybe 2,000 total homeless. But 99.9% of the time, those people in those homeless camps, they're mentally ill or drug addicted or both. 99.9% of the time. And people think, well, they're just down on their luck and stuff. No. That's not the case. That's hardly ever the case.
There's a handful of them that are like that, but majority are not.
In them homeless camps, there's not.
Sure.
Because in the homeless camps, those are the people that their families have tried to help. I mean, all these people have families.
Right.
And before they get to those camps, all of those families have tried to help these people. And they just refuse it because in their own delusional mind, once they either from the mental illness or from the mental illness that the drugs cause, they won't be any place that interferes with that lifestyle.
Yeah. So a state-run hospital, exactly. Explain to someone what that is. Explain to me, really, because I just know, I remember hearing about Weston, and I remember the one that's now a Walmart in, I've done a story on it. I'll have to, Spencer State Hospital. So it's a Walmart now. What is that exactly? Basically state-funded mental health hospitals?
Yes. And it's nothing like we have ever had before. And there's only a couple of them throughout the country, and they're starting to build more of those. We need probably like a 500-bed hospital because right now we're spending $35,000 a year on each inmate in our prison system. And like I said, we got about 12,000. Well, 10,000 of those people are in there for mental illness or drug addiction or both, or crimes related to drug addiction. Mm-hmm. 10,000 of them. And we're not helping them at all because we're going to release them. They're not going to be any better. That's the reason that recidivism rate, within 2 to 3 years, those people are right back in with law enforcement because we cannot give them the proper care that we need. And I was the physician director of the prisons. I know exactly what care we give. We cannot give them the adequate care that they need to allow that brain to recover. One of the main reasons is they smuggle drugs into the prison every day. Those people in the prisons, you can't, you cannot guarantee that they're not going to get high in prison because they will get high in prison. We have overdoses in prison all the time from smuggled in drugs.
Yeah.
So you have to have a maximum security state hospital, and these people have to be selected, and our prisons are full of them. In the average time of incarcerations, less than 5 years. Normally around 2 to 3 years, a lot of times. And that's all the time that we would need to have them in a hospital where instead of releasing them from a state prison facility and they're going to be using drugs in the parking lot before they pull out, or they're definitely going to be using drugs that weekend. And if we had them in a state hospital, they would walk out, and we could show them on the functional MRIs now how their brain has recovered over time. Mm. And it takes up to 2 years, maybe even 3 with some people.
Yeah. So basically, you're saying, so when they're in the prison, it's just going to,
never
deteriorate
changes.
Their brain even more.
It never changes. It doesn't change. If they go into the prison, with their prefrontal cortex turned off, they're going to come out with their prefrontal cortex turned off. And that's what narcotics does. It absolutely, when we do the functional MRIs on a healthy brain, and I'll send you some of the photos of that. Yeah. And the brain will light up, and it'll light up in the front. Well, the prefrontal cortex, that's where we get our reasoning from, our logic. That's where our inhibitions are kept. Well, narcotics are neurotoxic to that area of the brain, all parts of the brain, but especially the prefrontal cortex. And it turns off our ability to reason and think logically. So we become idiots. And the other part of it, our nucleus accumbens, which is the pleasure center of the brain, the narcotics take it over. So it hammers it with so much dopamine. It's like the most pleasurable sexual experience you've ever had in your life times 100. And it's constant. And that's the reason. And when you're taking people off of narcotics, that craving will increase for up to 2 years. Even while you're keeping them off of narcotics, that craving will increase up to 2 years.
That long, wow.
Yes, up to 2 years. And then after about 2 years, it starts dropping off a little bit. After 3 years, it drops off pretty well. So if we can get people that are addicted to narcotics, if we can get them off the drugs and keep them off the drugs up to 2 years, and it's really the 3rd year mark, they're going to go out there. They're going to be prosperous citizens of West Virginia. They could get a job. They're not going to be a burden on the state. They're not going to be out there laying drunk or in a prison or a jail that we have to feed. And that's the other thing that I was going to mention, that we spend $35,000 a year right now on every inmate. We could send them all to Fairmont State College for $17,000 a year, plus that would pay room and board. So
that's mind-blowing.
We can't arrest our way out of this. We got to stop building prisons, and we have 24 facilities. I know. I was part of it. We have 24 facilities. We need less than half of that amount. We need to get our inmates down to maybe 3,000 or 4,000, not 12,000. Those other people should be cycled through a state hospital, and then when they come out on the other end, we're not releasing drug addicts. We're releasing people that's got their brain function back and they're thinking properly again.
And it ultimately would probably be cheaper.
It would be cheaper.
Yeah, in the long run.
In the long run, it would be. I mean, to build a new hospital, obviously, that's going to be expensive. But it's not any more expensive than building these state prisons.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then the disastrous effects of it, where they're just probably going to come back. I mean, I hope that they don't, but odds are recidivism really high. So.
They do. You talk to any of the prison guards, and they'll release somebody. Well, he'll be back in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
and they are, because they continue the same behavior. There's not any way for the prison system to change that behavior. And people say, well, they should have more feel-good groups where they sit around, they talk about this, and they talk out their problem. That don't work with a damn. You have to have the time and the abstinence for the brain to heal. If that brain does not heal, and like I said, it takes 15 weeks just to begin to start to heal, then it takes another 1.5 years. So you're looking at 2-year minimum, and on some people, maybe even 3.
Yeah.
And it's known in medicine, anybody that goes through a traumatic experience, whether it's a bad divorce or death of a child, or, you can't even put death of a child in there because that never gets any better.
It's just a different
for the rest of your life. But if you go through a traumatic event, it takes the brain 2 years before you really get over that.
That makes sense. I mean, I think it would work the same if someone was to quit their cell phone. It would take 2 years to figure out how to not pick the stupid thing up.
Yeah. You take some young girl and drop her cell phone off into a lake, and she never gets it back. She's going to be distraught for 2 years.
Yeah, I can believe that. But yeah, and I believe, obviously, I'm an empath, but I understand what you're saying about, you have to medically heal your brain. Like, you talking about your feelings is good, but at the same time, you got to medically heal.
Yeah, talking about it is not going to help.
Right.
It's the time. It's the time. It's not even medication. It's the time. As long as they are living and breathing, that brain will recover, but it takes that amount of time to do that. And you can't, we give them, we're switching out one opioid for another, one narcotic for another when we're bringing them off of something. But then you have to get them off of that too, right?
Sure.
So you wean them off of that. You can't keep them on that very long because it prevents the brain from healing.
Yeah. Well, and also there's money flowing.
That's right. That's the other thing. We have been lied to for decades in this state.
Yeah.
Lied to for decades. And I'm trying to think what year it was. I want to say it was 1980. I'm not sure if that's the right year or not, but there was a letter, there was an article published in the New England Journal of Medicine where it said narcotics, the opioids were non-addictive. Non-addictive. And that's when it just went everywhere.
Are you talking about OxyContin? Because they marketed it and said
all of it. All of it. They said it was non-addictive. They said they had a study that they had these people in the hospital and they were prescribed the whatever narcotic it was, and they saw no evidence of addiction.
Yeah.
How asinine is that? I mean, that is just stupid.
Oh, it still blows my mind that the Sackler family has spent not one day in prison, and they, OxyContin is linked to like tens of thousands of deaths.
And here in West Virginia, they brought it into our state by the truckload.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a lot of hardworking people, especially in the southern coal field. There's a lot of injuries, and they got all of those people addicted to the narcotics. Not only did they get them addicted to the narcotics, but then in 2023, the fall of 2023, they finally put Narcan over the counter. You know why? Too many of our addicts were dying, and a dead addict does not buy any more drugs.
100%.
And they came out with the Narcan in over the counter in the fall of 2023, and that's the reason that our death rate started dropping in the spring of 2024. And it's only because they were losing too many people. We can't let all these people continue to die. West Virginia was losing, over 1,000 a year. And they said, we can't do this no more. Let's bring out the Narcan, because it had been available for 20 years. But they finally in 2023 said, we got to bring it out.
Yeah. Yeah. They was trying to, it took forever for it to get approved. And Huntington was.
It had been approved for 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Huntington was ripped in half when they took away OxyContin, and all the people had to turn to heroin on the street. And, it just, man, I'm ready to run through this wall, Dr. Wood. You got me all hyped up because I'm just so passionate about this stuff, and it all lines up. And you saying about the frontal lobe makes sense, because I kind of describe it to people. I have a buddy coming in who I knew before, during, and after his recovery, and we're going to have an episode, and I'm going to talk about basically he was a different person. Like, he was a different person. It's like you think you know somebody, and then they get addicted to this
They
drug.
do become a different person.
Yeah.
That's the reason so many families will say, I just want my son back. I just want my daughter back. I don't even know who they are any longer, because they will have a personality change because part of their brain is not working. The part of that brain that gives them reasonable thought processes is gone. The only thing that they're surviving on is that nucleus accumbens and that dopamine rush. And they're waiting until that next fix. And you ask your buddy, he's waiting 24 hours a day. He's waiting until that next fix, until he finally got away from it.
Yeah.
And only about 2 to 3% of the population can get away from narcotics on their own.
Wow, really?
It's that addictive. It's only like 2 or 3%. And a lot of those guys are the guys that have a come to Jesus moment where they have near-death experience. Sometimes that'll knock them across that line where they say, I've had enough, I'm done.
Sure.
And then the women, or if they have children, that really helps them be strong. And if you have a woman who has beat an addiction, you ask her, how did she do it? And she'll say, my kids. I did it for my kids. One of the last patients that I had, which is in Washington State, Cody, his mom, Patty, worked for me. She was my x-ray tech. No, she was my lab tech. She ran the lab at the clinic that I ran out in Cleella, Washington. And Cody had been away at a rehab center for a couple months. And Patty came into my office one day and said, hey, Cody's back. I said, tell him I want him. I need to see him. She goes, I think he's doing really well. And I said, oh my God, that's wonderful. Patty was just all excited. I said, that's wonderful. I said, tell him I want to talk to him. Being an ex-cop, I'd been a cop for 20 years, state trooper for almost 10, and then a special agent for 10. All I did was drug work. I don't know if I said it, but I made the largest drug seizure in history in 1988. It was 56 tons.
Oh, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
After this.
So let me get back to Cody. So
Sure.
anyways, so Cody came in after a couple of days. I said, don't bull me. When's the last time you shot up? 3 days ago.
Oh, wow.
I said, Cody, you're going to kill your mom if anything happens to you. He goes, I swear, Doc, I'm going to quit. I swear, this is it. I promise. I said, I'm done. And you'll hear that time and time and time again from these people.
Sure.
Patty went home 2 weeks later for lunch, found Cody dead on the couch. Happens all the time. They can't stop on their own. Like I said, there's only like 2 or 3% that can stop on their own.
Wow.
Yeah. And these rehab clinics, 30% will relapse in the first week. 60% will relapse in the first month. And up to 90% will relapse in that first year. And the other 10% are the ones that have overdosed and died.
No way.
Yes. That's why. And these rehab clinics, they're like a scam. And you have all your viewers. I'm telling you, I'll tell you the movie to watch. It is called Body Brokers, and it was filmed. The setting was Columbus, Ohio, and they even talk about West Virginia. And that shows the scams and stuff that's going on in these rehab clinics. Mm-hmm. It's called Body Brokers. Excellent film.
Is there anything we're doing right? I mean, I know it doesn't.
No, we haven't done anything right in 40 years. We haven't. We haven't done anything right in 40 years. And people say, well, we have to give them housing. This is not a housing problem. It's never been a housing problem. These people had housing before they went to the homeless camps. They had families and homes and stuff before they went to the homeless camps. And it's never been a housing problem. And down in Florida, Dr. Mallet, I think his name was Mallet, and he worked for President Trump. But anyways, he started a 400-bed hospital down in Florida, and it's called Safe Harbor. Mm-hmm. And I called down and I told him I'm a former cop. I want to talk to one of the deputies, and the deputies are the ones that run it for the county. And I was talking to one of the supervisors, one of the deputies. I said, how's it going? He goes, it's a scam. He goes, it's not working. He goes, we'll have people come in here and they may stay 1 week, maybe 2 max, and then they're gone. And he goes, only 3% of the people that leave here go to another facility. 97% are going right back to the street. So it's not a housing problem. It's a mental health and drug addiction problem. And if we don't cure that mental health and that drug addiction problem, they're going to go right back to the street. They're going to be lying to everybody because you can't help it.
I've heard of experiences like that where they get them doing okay, and maybe they even get a job, and they just miss that life of like living on the streets. It's more than that. It's the addiction. It's the craving, and like I said, that craving will increase up to 2 years after they do abstinence. Once they're abstinent. So when you stop. If you stop, and that's the reason that if we get them in a state hospital, they're going to have to be there at least for 2, if not 3 years, because that craving continues to increase while they're coming off of the narcotics. So it's an inverse track. And my heart breaks when I think about those who got hurt at work, and then the doctor was like, yeah, this is non-habit forming, try this OxyContin 60, and then they're like, oh, this ended my pain. And all of a sudden,
pharmacist and the doctors, a lot of those doctors and I've had doctors arrested when I was a special agent.
Really? Let's go.
No, I can't talk about it.
Okay.
But anyways, I can't talk about one, but he wasn't a doctor. He was a preacher. But he was
what?
Yeah, he was a preacher. He was hiding behind the Bible, and a lot of con artists will do this. He was not only, he'd been the mayor of this community at one time, and he was the pastor at the church, and he was buying kiddie porn from Hong Kong.
Oh my!
Him and his wife were pedophiles, and before I caught up with him, God only knows what they had been doing.
What state was this? Can we say
Oregon? Oh, whew. That was Oregon.
Goodness.
Yeah, that was Oregon. But anyways, the drug addiction and the mental health problem, and that's the thing about if you got somebody that's mentally ill, they're a whole hell of a lot easier to treat than somebody who's on drugs and has a mental illness because of the drugs. I mean, that makes it 10 times worse. Mental illness, you can figure out what's going on with this person. And I've got a good example of that. Mm-hmm. When I was running that clinic at Cle Elum, there was a guy his first name was Ron. And his family brought him in. He'd been homeless. He'd been living on the street and stuff. And he was not only he had an addiction, but what he did, he just smoked weed. He wasn't on the heavy narcotics, but he was smoking weed. But
Ron,
the problem,
Ron's my dude.
But the problem with him, he was schizophrenic.
Oh, that's a problem.
He was very schizophrenic. And he would, when I first saw him, when the family brought him in, and he just screaming. He was like, I don't know why they won't give me an effing job. He goes, my first incarceration just when they found my girlfriend hanging in our apartment, and my second incarceration just over the firearms violation, but I don't know why they won't give me an effing job. And I'd say, because you're crazy. And he'd go, oh, yeah. And I asked him, I said, how old were you when you first started to think that you were losing it? He goes, about 10 years old. But he would build himself into a crescendo and into a rage all the time. And you had to deflect him. Like if, say that you were Ron and you're starting to scream, I'd say, did that light just blink? He'd get real calm and go, no, I don't think so. I'd ask him, he'd be building himself into a rage. How many colors does duct tape come in? Anything off the wall.
Right.
He'd go, well, gray, black. And he goes, and I think Seattle Seahawks. Because he loved the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got him on some medication for the schizophrenia. And I didn't really care if he was toting. I told him you got to stop a little bit because it's going to ruin your lungs. It's going to turn your lungs black. They're finally finding out that, you get cancer, lung cancer just as well with cigarette smoke or weed smoke,
Sure, yeah,
it does the same thing. Plus it's neurotoxic to the brain, and how many old toters do you know? Hey, man, how you doing, man? They're like that their entire lives. They're part of that brain's turned off. They've lost their critical thinking skills.
I'm kind of jealous sometimes. I'm like, I'm tired of critical thinking. It's exhausting.
So anyways, I saw Ron a couple times, and then he failed to show up for his next appointment. And I'm like, the typical.
Right.
Typical. Because treating these people in an outpatient setting almost never works.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got maybe 5 that I can count in 30 years. I helped an outpatient that were either drug addicted, mentally ill, or both. 5. You can't do it in an outpatient setting because that craving is just too great and they go right back into it. Whether, if they stay off of it for a week or 2, they're right back on it. They're lost again.
Sure.
So anyway, Ron didn't show up. And after a couple of days, I got an email, and it's from Ron. He goes, this is almost verbatim. Never forget this. He goes, Dear Dr. Wood, I apologize for not making my appointment. I was in Seattle, and I tied a sheet around my neck, and I tied it off and jumped off the overpass on I-5, but the cops got to me in time, and I didn't die, and now I'm in the psychiatric ward in the jail in Seattle.
Goodness.
But I just wanted to let you know you're the best doctor I ever had.
Tell me you framed that.
I still have that email. And if it hadn't have been so tragic, it would have been funny.
Right, yeah.
But anyways, they eventually let him out. And he came back to Cleellum, came back to my clinic. And I started hammering more. I added one more. First we started him just on lithium to get him calmed down a little bit, and then we started him on some Abilify is what it was, and that worked really great for Ron. Really great for Ron. He stopped screaming, and I said, Ron, how about if I get you a job? He goes, I'd like that. He goes, I can't do much. I said, that's okay. I said, can you be a janitor? He goes, yeah, I can be a janitor. There was a Radio Shack in Cleellum, Washington. Of all things, a Radio Shack. And yes, they still exist.
Oh, yeah.
In Cleellum, Washington. So I knew the guy down there, and he was one that rebuilt my computers. And I talked to him. I said, would you take him and give him a job, let him sweep your floors, do whatever the hell, pay him whatever the hell.
Sure.
And he said, the whole town knew him. Everybody was afraid of him because he was dangerous as hell. I mean, his girlfriend was hanging in their apartment one time. That was one of the arrests that he had.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a problem. But anyway, so the guy said, I'm going to wear a gun. I said, I don't care. Wear a gun. Wear a gun the whole time he's here if you want to. He was, okay, I'll wear a gun, but I'll hire him. So anyway, so I got Ron a job down there. Down there. And he was a janitor. He got an apartment. And before I left Washington State, he wanted me to come over and see his apartment. So I went over and I visited him, and he took me around in his apartment, and all the wall. He just loved the Seattle Seahawks. Everything in that apartment was Seattle Seahawks.
Oh,
the wallpaper, everything.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, I'm leaving. I'm going back to West Virginia. And he just gave me a hug. He started crying. He said, thank you for getting me out of hell. Now, that's what we can do with the state hospital.
So Ron's okay?
But only 5 out of in 30 years that I was able to do in an outpatient setting. But an inpatient setting, that would be the typical patient that would walk out of a state hospital.
Really?
They would cry and say, thank you, dear Lord, for getting me out of hell. Because those people are in hell and they can't get out on their own.
So Ron's okay?
Yeah, Ron's okay.
Oh, yes. Okay. I was afraid it wasn't going to end up like the other guy.
Okay, when I left, knock on wood.
Hope you're okay out there, Ron. Yeah, man. Well, I mean, you sold me. Have you pitched this to any of the higher ups?
I've talked to Governor Morrissey. He's not in the mood. Talking about Spencer, we had 7 small hospitals. I believe he sold them all now. And they're going to be something else, but they would not be able to be used for what we need anyway. I mean, we need a big hospital.
Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of them's out of date. I mean, they're built in the 1800s.
Yes,
of them,
right.
So.
Yes. Yeah. Those buildings, the structures would not be what we need.
Plus, Trans-Allegheny is super haunted, and we can't get rid of that. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. But yeah, that's... I mean, you've sold me. I mean, listen, I don't know anything about anything, but all of this numerically and emotionally makes sense to me. And it sounds like it could be what we're missing. So, yes. I mean, you know, a facility like this is going to be what, hundreds of millions of dollars probably?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get it, but at the same time, like, we kind of waste money.
Well, like, right now we're giving corrections rate at $400 million a year.
Yeah.
$400 million a year. And we need less than half of those facilities. Right. If we would get those people out and run them through the hospital system over time.
What's ROI? It's long-term investment of like, look at what this will do eventually.
Oh, yeah. And not only what it would do to the individual patient, but look what it would do for the status of West Virginia. If you owned a company, would you want to come to a state that had the highest overdose death rate in the nation, the highest drug addiction rate in the nation, least healthy population in the nation, the lowest job participation rate in the nation? If you got any brains, you're not bringing a company to this state. But if we would get all of that taken care of, that's our baseline. We have to get that taken care of before we are going to be attractive to outside businesses to come here.
Sure, yeah, because currently they just want to put their servers here, and that's really it.
And they're going to bring in outside employees to do that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
You know, they may hire a few people, laborers or something from in-state, but I guarantee you, a lot of those people in those data centers are going to be coming from out of state for that company. That company's going to move in here, and these companies are not startup companies for the most part. These are dedicated companies. They've already got thousands and thousands of employees all across the world.
Oh yeah,
they're going to bring those employees in.
Facebook and like all these people, like they're not really concerned about building West Virginia's economy. That's
the thing, and that's the thing. We have been lied to for decades. I mean, West Virginia have been taken advantage of so much in the past, and that's what really pisses me off.
Sure, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's pennies. That's what really gets my blood boiling.
Give it away for pennies, man. Shoo-wee, that was good. So CIA. All right. So you leave the state police. Is there a certain reason you said you were recruited by the CIA? Is that kind of how that came about, or?
I was recruited by Buddy Harris.
Okay.
That's what I'll say.
Okay. Good old Buddy.
Good old Buddy. And then I helped train students for the CIA, Secret Service, U.S. Marshal Service.
How do you do that? What's the curriculum? It's all right, don't get on the internet ever. Step one.
Well, if you would Google Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia, you will see back then we were training, I think it was 63 different federal law enforcement agencies. The only ones that didn't train there was the Bureau, who trained at Quantico, and the DEA. When it became the DEA, then they didn't train down there either. They did it first, but then they went to their own facility. But everybody else, Secret Service, Customs Service, ATF, everybody, Fish and Wildlife, everything, Border Patrol, everything.
Wow. That was it. Step one. All right, recruits. John Kennedy. We don't talk about it. Okay, next, and then we. I imagine like the vetting process. Even do they do an extensive vetting process on you? What's that like? You got to give them like everyone know's phone number.
He went for. Buddy would recruit 5 people a year. That's what he would do, 5 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of the 5 for 86.
From the hills of West Virginia.
Yeah. And the only reason, because I had a 4.0 GPA in college when I left state police. And I had good grades. I had the background. And I was the outstanding cadet for my state police class. I had one of the highest felony clearance rates in the state as a trooper. So and plus my psychological profile, he went over that a bunch. And I'll tell you, this was kind of funny. And they're looking for certain personalities to do certain things. Obviously, what I did, it's not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You're by yourself all the time. You're not relying on nobody. You're not relying on nobody for nothing. And when they did my Rorschach test, the ink block test, they did a couple of them. And I remember the psychiatrist, when we got done with the ink blot test, he looked at me and goes, I just got to tell you, he goes, those are disturbing. And what it was on those ink blot tests, they want to see your humanity. They want you to see people's faces, maybe a town, maybe a building, something in those ink blots, something to do with humanity. Well, I didn't see any of that. I grew up in the woods. of West Virginia. I was staying overnight by myself in the woods by myself by the time I was 12 years old. I saw animals. I saw mountains. I saw streams. I saw nature is what I saw in all them tests. And all those ink blots. I didn't say a single person. That's the reason he said, those are very disturbing. But that is exactly what they were looking for.
Right.
Exactly what they were looking for. So they took me down to Georgia, and I can honestly tell you what waterboarding feels like.
You got waterboarded?
I can honestly tell you about what waterboarding feels like.
What does it feel like?
But anyways, they put me, you'll find out. You'll read the book.
Oh, okay. I don't want to find out.
Yeah,
but I'll read the book.
You read the books.
Okay.
But anyways, all of that's in
the JFK joke was just a joke.
Once you get up to Thorn, then that's when I'm in San Francisco. But
gotcha.
But there's a lot went on before I ever got to San Francisco. Wow. But anyways, so I went through his training, and he called it the program. He goes, I'm going to send you through my program. It's not going to be comfortable. He goes, if you want to quit at any time, you just tell me, you're out.
Right.
I'm like, I won't quit. And anyways, it was not very comfortable, but I did very, very well. Actually, I figured out what they were doing, and I wasn't supposed to be able to do that. And I did figure out what they were doing. So I had actually notified Buddy that I had already figured it out even before the ending.
Mm.
And I knew what they were going to do to me, and they tortured the hell out of me. And but I had left them a note, and that note had been written like 3 or 4 days prior. And I was just putting up with it just to put up with it and just show them that I could take it. So anyway, after that, and for the people, Red Sword and Thorn, they're available on Amazon.
Heck yeah, we got them in the description.
Yes, and so some things started happening. We received information that they were going to develop an organization to remove Mikhail Gorbachev. They hated General Secretary Gorbachev. He was too liberal, which he was. They were afraid he was going to bring down the USSR, which he did. I mean, these guys were right.
Mm-hmm.
These guys were right. And they felt that he was too close to President Reagan and British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, which he was. And his policies destroyed the USSR. And so they wanted him gone. And they were going to kill him. They were going to kill him in his dacha in Crimea if it had gone right, if things had gone right. It didn't go right. And it didn't go right because they didn't have the money to pull off the coup in 91. And the coup was in August of 91. The USSR was dissolved during Christmas, I think Christmas.
Tear down that wall.
1991.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all in that book too.
Nice.
And so I left shortly after that. I think I left 3 months later, resigned from government, decided to come home.
Wow.
To go to med school.
That's bananas. So why do they torture you to just see if you'll break?
I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to read the book.
I got it. Okay. That's so crazy.
Yeah.
And then you were like, let me get my doctorate. Let's see what happens. We'll kind of piddle around here. But I can see that you saying about the Rorschach test. And for those who don't know, it's like the ink blot when you see the like black and everything makes little shapes on a piece of paper and then they hold it up and say, what do you see here? I can see you as like a very intelligent, pragmatic person that I'd want in the CIA. And we've only talked for like an hour and a half. So I can really see that though, but I'm curious.
Well, I've never said I was in the CIA.
Well, training. You trained and I don't know if you technically can even say that, but I'm just curious if like
I worked for the government.
Right. Work for the government. That's what we'll say. That's what we'll say. Listen, I'm very green on this, but I am curious, like, did you have empathy when you went and you did murder cases for these families that were involved and different stuff like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes. It was horrible. It was horrible. And you'd go and I remember one time I was at a hospital and lady's boy was killed and she came in and she just went straight to the floor when the doctor told her I'm staying there. It's just horrible.
Sure.
Those are the most horrible things that can happen to a person in this life is to bury a child. There's nothing in this world worse than burying your child.
Yeah. So you got a heart. We got to clarify that.
And then, you have to.
Yeah, but at the same
time. And then when I became a doctor, hell, I get tears in my eyes every baby I delivered. I delivered over 40. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The nurses would always make fun of me. Oh, Dr. Wood's getting tears in his eyes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's precious. It's precious. Life is precious.
Mm-hmm. Heck yeah, it is. Well, that's good to note. And I do want to tell people, I mean, you didn't work for them. You worked for the government. You kind of trained people that may have been involved. What is the CIA exactly? I mean, for those who don't know, because
it's an intelligence.
I mean, we got tinfoil hats here. You see that, right? We can put them on. But
it's the premier intelligence operation in the world. Our agency. I mean, they do top-notch stuff. And they were just on the news here the other day. They made the ruse of, they distracted the Iranian people that were hunting that last pilot, the colonel, and they made a ruse out someplace else. So they were going to focus all their people over there because CIA put it out that we were trying to get him out of the country. And he was over there. He wasn't over here. Over there, he was over here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what I almost said that's what we do. I mean, that's what they do all the time.
Sure, yeah.
They do all the time. And with what I was doing, what we ended up doing, and I may have been the person out there that was in the public, but there were people behind me. Mm-hmm. There was 4 or 5 behind me. And we were able to pull it off. And as a result of what we did, the USSR dissolved. The Cold War ended. KGB was disbanded. And shortly after that, I left the government.
That's incredible. I imagine that is a very isolating job, though, like you say.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
You're by yourself all the time. But if I had not grown up in West Virginia and had spent all the time in the woods, and I'm from a big family, there's 5 boys in my family and 2 girls. So, I don't have to be around people. That was just my personality, I mean, I enjoy being around people, mm-hmm. but I don't have to be. And growing up in the woods, if I had not grown up in the woods and along the streams in West Virginia, I'd have never been able to do what I did. Never.
Makes total sense. Did your parents or anything ever be like, well, I really miss Norman. Wonder what he's doing?
My mom.
Oh, yeah.
Dad, he was busy. He was a doctor, and he was always busy. But my mom, this is the way my mom always described me. He was born smiling. He's never met a stranger, and you'll never know what he's doing or where he will show up.
Mm.
That's how my mom always described me. That's pretty accurate, I guess.
Yeah.
You know.
Wow, man. I'm curious because what a day for you to be in the studio, because it's a weird time. Like, we don't do politics on the show, but right now is a really scary time for me because I have no clue what's going on in Iran. And I'm just curious, what is going on right now and what are we potentially looking at when it comes to this war?
Well, my view on that is, and it is from dealing with these types of people when I was still in the government. The most dangerous people in the world are religious fanatics of any sort, whether they're Christians, during the Crusades, and we killed a lot of people.
Oh, millions.
The Crusades, and the Muslim radicals right now, but the mullahs in Iran, these people, they would think nothing of using a nuclear weapon if they would get one. So, we're worried about the price of gas and some other things. Our costs are going up, food and stuff like that. But if they got a bomb, they would murder millions of people, because they would torch Israel if they got a bomb. I mean, they chant that every day, and they would do it to the United States if they got the opportunity, because they're chanting every day, death to Israel, death to America. This has not changed in 47 years.
And I understand that. I think what scares me is the civilian part of it, where we're threatening to blow up civilian infrastructure that will kill who knows how many people if it happens. And, we're early in the morning of April 7th. Who knows what's going to happen this evening? But the way I am is I'm like, we have to do whatever we can to avoid war whenever possible. And I know sometimes it ain't possible. And I'm just, you having the professional opinion and being involved kind of in this stuff, definitely in the 80s and early 90s, that just really makes me curious. And I understand that, it is, terrifying to think of what would happen if a dictator gets a nuke. But at the same time, I just hope to God we don't use them too. So it's such a, I know I'm nervous, and I know a lot of people probably are.
And that's a good nervous to have, because we don't want innocent people hurt.
Sure.
And I mean, war is terrible. Anybody that's been in shootings and stuff, and I have, that type of stuff is horrible.
Yeah.
So, you try to do what is necessary, which they can never have a nuclear weapon, not religious fanatics of any kind.
Sure.
And these people would use it. And I'll tell you something else. People, if they read my book, Checkmate, that was about the first World Trade Center bombing.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Which was that 92?
93.
93?
Mm-hmm. 93, February 26, 93.
So you wrote a few books. You got more than this
5
out there.
Yeah, I've got 5 on Amazon.
Yeah.
And this was from Saddam Hussein, who had set this up. This was the Iraqi intelligence service that was actually running this. And they wanted to bring 5,000 pounds of hydrogen cyanide in barrels and have it set next to the van that actually blew up, the Ryder van that actually blew up. And if you read in the book Checkmate, we stole that van. So it wasn't part of that. If that cyanide had been in the van next to it, it would have killed probably 50,000 people.
So they were actively trying to prevent it while it was, and that's how they ended up stealing that van and kept it from being massive. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, nobody knows it. The federal judge, during the sentencing, this was not supposed to be talked about because we didn't have. Actually, the KGB had a agent in the Iraqi intelligence service, and we were trying to protect him. And we couldn't let his identity out until after the fall of Iraq, and we took out the HEU, highly enriched uranium, that Saddam Hussein was developing. He was developing his own bomb. So we were getting information from this undercover operative that was from the KGB originally, then it became the SVR.
How do we...
or SRV.
How's it possible for us to get along? I'm just curious what you think.
With who?
With...
religious fanatics?
Well, with not fanatics, but just... like, I mean, there's, I can't remember how many billion Muslims there are, and a majority are not fanatics. So I'm just curious how we all...
yeah, there's nothing wrong with the Muslim religion, but it's the same thing, any fanatic of any religion.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I have been all around this world. And whether it's Buddhist or Muslim, Jewish, doesn't make any difference. Most people are just good people. We're all the same. If you spend a lot of time like I have around this world, you will see that, there's good people everywhere and there's also bad people everywhere. And that's the problem with a lot of people. They don't want to understand that there are, sometimes there's just some people that are no damn good. They'll never be any damn good. And it's not, and they want to say, well, they had a bad childhood. No, it was the way their brain developed in the womb. And that brain didn't develop like to the extent of a normal brain, to where they look at things with a different prism, through a different prism.
So kind of like,
and they may say you do something and say you need killed. That's evil. That's blasphemy. Whatever you just did, we got to cut your head off.
Sure. Well, and two, you have people that are born with psychotic tendencies that the switch can be flipped, like with serial killers, for instance.
And you really never know about those people,
right,
until that brain matures.
Your medical career, where did you end up going to get your doctorate? Lewisburg.
Mm-hmm.
What was
graduated with honors?
Was it what is the college there?
West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine.
That's it. Yeah,
largest medical school in the state.
I have a friend who graduated there, and then they moved to Jacksonville.
They graduate more doctors than Marshall and WU combined.
Yeah,
that's how big WSOM has become.
What years were that?
I graduated in 97.
Okay.
I started in 93, graduated in 97, finished my residency up in Wheeling, OVMC.
Okay, and then where did you go after that? Did you open your own hospital, or did you go like ER?
I opened my own urgent care clinic. My wife was from Petersburg. So we went over there. We bought a farm in Fort Ashby, West Virginia. And we bought an old restaurant right along the main drag before you get into Cressup Town, going towards Cumberland. And we built Doctor's Urgent Care. My brother, Dr. Vic Wood, and I'm from a medical family. I was the 15th doctor in my family. I think now we're up to like 22 or 23.
Humble brag. Let's go.
It's just crazy.
But
anyway, so I built that urgent care center. Mm-hmm. And then I also had one up at Deep Creek Lake and a couple more.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so to clarify, when you got everything built and you were up and running, what year was that?
2000.
Okay. So you did that for...
yeah.
How many years?
We went through our divorce in 2000 and about 2010, and then I was recruited by the Veterans Administration to be the medical director out in Seattle.
Heck yeah! Now, what does that job entail? Like when you say, "Hey, come direct."
Well, I ran their clinic, and it's called a CBOC, community-based outpatient clinic. I loved it. I loved the veterans. Just a great bunch of guys. And such fascinating, horrible stories at times. And I would laugh with them. I'd cry with them. It was amazing. And those people, and I had some veterans from World War II. One guy in particular, he was in his 90s, I guess. And he came in and he called me son. He goes, son. He goes, I'm the only veteran you're ever going to talk to that had his ass personally chewed by General George Patton.
Oh, nice.
And I'm like, no kidding. I said, you got to tell me that story. So he told me that story. And he was just a great bunch of guys.
That's great.
And gals, guys and gals, mostly guys, though, talking about World War II and in combat roles. Most of them were guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I've, veteran stories they run so deep and we do them every now and then. I just did one. So there's only been 3 conscientious objectors to receive the Medal of Honor. And one of them was born in Morgantown.
Oh,
yeah. He's from Morgantown, Thomas Bennett in Vietnam. And, I find, veteran stories just so, thick with history, but also important to, I don't know. I feel like we just look over stuff.
Oh, we do.
Yeah,
we do. When I was the medical director for the VA, there was a couple people I wanted to fire and they wouldn't let me fire them. I did get one girl fired, but it took me over a year.
All right.
It took me over a year. And then, because she was just treating the veterans horrible. When I took over that clinic, they had an approval rating of 25%.
Mm-hmm.
That was veteran solicitation. After the first year, I had an approval rating of 75%.
Oh, nice.
I went from 25 to 75%. They want to know how I was able to do that. And I said, I tell my people, and they're big staff, I had, I don't know, maybe 35, 40 people.
Yeah.
Several doctors, several mid-levels, psychologists and everybody, therapists, everybody. And I told them, do their damn jobs or they're going to have my foot in their ass.
Right.
Do your job. I
Right.
don't want to hear anything. And then I uncovered some fraud. And this is the reason I left the VA. This was before Trump. Once Trump took over, they started firing these people. But at that point, the union had the Veterans Administration in a stranglehold, the employee union.
Mm-hmm.
And I found where some doctors were actually fraudulently filling out reports 2 and 3 weeks before they even saw the patient, because they were judged on the amount of volume of their writing, not the quality. It was the quantity. If you wrote a whole paragraph or 2 or 3 paragraphs, they got a bonus.
Right.
They were writing up these paragraphs before they ever saw the patient. You can't do that. It's fraud.
Sure, yeah.
That's fraud. And I took it to the head person, and she just kind of like brushed it under the rug, and I'm like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
That's the reason I left.
How are we handling veterans' health care in this country?
I think it's a lot better since Trump took some of the control away from the union, because the union, like I said, you couldn't fire anybody. You had bad people that were treating the veterans horribly, and you couldn't get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that changed, but I haven't been a part of that for, since 2000 and I guess 15, 16. So.
Sure. Well, the Iraq war was still going on, which had calmed down a lot more then. But but even still, I always wonder, because the suicide rate's so high, and how are we failing mental health when it comes to when they come back? And I don't even know, is it something we can even cure? I don't even know.
Well, you can't cure it.
Right.
That's the thing. These are memories and emotions from these veterans that they will have for the rest of their lives, because they have seen the worst of humanity. When you shoot somebody with high-powered rifles and stuff, it's not pretty. It's just not a whole. I mean, they're blowed apart.
Sure.
It's blowed apart. And you see your friends like that. You see your buddies like that. And not only are you doing that to other people, but you're getting that done to your buddies, and hopefully not you, but that's what goes on. Someone
you just had conversations with for 2 years,
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Bunkmate.
Yeah.
Bunkmate. Next thing you know, he's laying there and he's been killed. So you have to, you live with that. I mean, even as a state trooper, all the death, like I said, I took over 40 dead people out of cars, 8 one weekend. That is, those images, you never forget those images. You never forget these images. You don't even forget their names.
Sure, yeah.
Because that is just burnt into your memory. And they say that the average person will have maybe 8 very traumatic episodes in their life.
Mm.
Law enforcement officers, fire departments, EMS, they have like 50 in their life.
I believe it.
That's what you're exposed to every week.
Sure.
Every week.
Do you ever have to use your firearm?
Oh yeah.
On the same way, I was going to say, I mean, that's probably nearly guaranteed. I did a story. I always think about when we lose state police over the years, and I found out like 42 have died since the state police began. But I'm just curious if you ever got in a situation where you were like, "That was a little close," or
all the time.
Yeah,
all the time. All the time. You'll get into situations that you don't even know are dangerous until afterwards. Then you figure out what really was going on.
Mm-hmm.
A good friend of mine, Phil Kesner, he was the one that was shot in front of the Moundsville prison on November 7th, 1979.
Oh, wow.
We were good friends. He lived in my brother's rented place. His wife, Connie, I went to school with. And I was stationed over at Philippi at the time, and I was actually on leave when that happened. And we got the phone call because Dad was the doctor, the prison doctor at the time. And Dad was at my place, and they called Dad. He had already left and was heading back to Moundsville. So I jumped in my car, threw all because I was on the SWAT team. I was one of the original members of the state police SWAT team. I'm one of the original team members of the state police SWAT team. They started that back in 78, 79.
So they was like, "Hey, we're starting this new thing. Who wants to be in it?" And you were like,
no.
How does it work?
They come and they select you.
Oh, got you. Okay.
Yeah, they select you. I was the only one out of my class. I was thinking if Mike Jordan, if Mike wasn't with us too. Mike may have been on there too. So there were actually two of us out of my class. But no, you're selected.
Yeah.
You're selected.
What's the difference in like what is SWAT for? Is that for like when you need to go and do breaches or
Yes.
Okay.
That type of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, if you got somebody in the woods, in one of the stories, I captured one of the guys in the woods. And that's in Red Sword. That was when I was still in the state police.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this book process, when did you decide like, hey, I got a lot of stuff up here. I need to kind of put it in written form?
I'll tell you when. I thought about it for a long time. And then one day I was sitting in a bar in Edmonds, Washington, when I was still medical director for the VA. And I'm sitting there at the bar and was watching Mariners, I think, play baseball.
Mm-hmm.
The Christopher, who was the bartender, he knew me. He'd bring me out. He'd cook me a big steak, and he'd bring me shots of Crown, that type of stuff. And there's this guy sitting beside me, real dark hair, not high and tight, but short, and kind of buffed. And he's sitting there typing away on his laptop. And I'm sitting there, and I'm eating, and we're saying, "Hey, how you doing? Fine. How are you doing?" You know, blah, blah, blah. And I said, "What are you typing on?" He goes, "One of my novels." And I said, "That's kind of cool." I said, "What do you write?" He goes, "Well, I'm Sean Salazar." I said, "Nornwood." And he goes, "I'm the author of the Babylon Prophecies." That's on Amazon and different things.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "And I'm writing another book." And I said, "I've got a story that needs to be written, and I've always been looking for somebody to write that story." And he goes, "What's it about?" He stopped typing. He goes, "What's it about?" And here to find out, he was naval intelligence. So I told him, and we're like brothers at that point. And I told him what happened. And I said, go to youtube.com and search Special Agent Norman Wood. There's an old video, back in San Francisco when I made that drug bust. And I told him what it was about. People think it's just a big drug bust, but that's really not what the big story is about. The big story is stopping that money from being sent from the bank in Luxembourg to the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we stopped.
Sure, yeah.
We stopped at $50 million.
How you do that? You just hit enter? Like, hey.
You take the drugs.
Okay, got it.
You take the drugs, and the buyer, and it was out of New York and Toronto. There was a drug syndicate that was actually buying them. And then when you take the drugs, they don't finish the payment. They don't release the payment.
Mm.
They don't release the payment to the people.
Makes sense.
So anyway, so I told him what it was about. He goes, "Oh my God." He goes, You're the guy that I write about. You're the type of guys that I write about. And I said, "Well, this story, da-da-da-da-da." And he slid a computer to me. He goes, "You go over there in the corner, type me up a couple paragraphs." Because I'd been thinking about it a long time. So I went over there and I typed up like a page, how I was going to start the story. And I took it back up and he read it and he looked at me and goes, "I'll be your greatest fan." He goes, "You've got to write these books." So that's how I actually started thinking about them. And then when I left the government at the Veterans Administration and I came home, I went to work for the West Virginia Division of Corrections. I started writing them. So now I've got 5 on Amazon.
Heck yeah.
I got one more to write, and that's a hard one to write.
So would these be considered, I mean, you change names and there's aliases. Would these be considered nonfiction or?
Well, they're historical fiction.
Okay, got it.
It's still a novel, and the definition of a novel is a fictional work. Correct?
Got it. Yep.
So you change all of the names. And I changed all of the names. Now for the TV series that you're going to do, we're going to use some of the names because, and I've got permission. The guy that I put in prison, and there's pictures in the back of Thorn.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, look in the back of Thorn.
I'm a picture guy, so.
Yeah, look in the back of.
Oh, wow, cool.
So, anyways, Calvin Robinson, who I put in prison for 31 years, I got him out. I got him out here in, I think it was 2019. I wrote a letter to the federal judge in San Francisco, and they released him.
Let's go.
Yeah, and I'm the one that put him in prison. I got him out.
Dude, that's character building stuff right there. I love that. Yeah. It's nice talking to you because there's a lot of things I relate to and things that I there's a lot of relatability across beliefs, and I'm what people would consider, I don't know. I don't really consider myself any kind of party. I just want to talk to everyone and learn about their experience. And that's what is really cool to me is there's a lot of really full circle good dude moments in your life. And I love the state hospital stuff. I hope the right person's listening to that so we can get that rolling because I think that could change things. But so do these have audio versions?
Yes.
Lord.
Matter of fact, and when I listen to the audio version, my God, I mean, it'll bring tears to my eyes sometimes. I mean, it's like I'm back there.
Really? Oh, so they do like sound effects and stuff? Or like, is it somebody?
No,
reading?
It's a virtual voice.
Okay, got it.
It's a virtual voice on Amazon, but still, it's, and I've read them books. My God, I wrote them. I've read them 1,000 times.
Sure.
But when I listen to it on the audio books, I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, wow. I mean, we were so lucky. How did we pull that off? And I'll tell you one story. This was May 23rd, about 7:00 at night. And I was at my office at 1700 Montgomery Street. Another special agent from the Coast Guard, Ray Tipton. Ray's still alive. He lives in Vancouver. We're as tight as two brothers could ever get.
Mm-hmm.
Ray did all this with me. And I don't know how many times Ray told me, he goes, if we live through this, I'm going to kill you. Because I used to get him involved in so much stuff. He goes, if we live through this, I'm killing you. And I learned to fly. And I would take him up with me and I'd say, listen, I can fly a little bit, but I can't fly a little bit and take pictures at the same time. Mm-hmm. So that picture in there of looking down on the boats in the 7 Mile Slough, those were taken by Ray, but I was flying the plane.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I got a picture in there of me in front of the plane. But anyways, Ray was just amazing what he did. And he was for the Coast Guard. Great bunch of people. And I didn't work with anybody. I didn't even work with people out of the same office that I was assigned to. And I was assigned to the customs office.
Mm-hmm.
Rollin died here last year, died of a brain tumor. Rollin had an incredible history for the government service. And when I was sent to San Francisco from the training center, I was told to go out and talk to Rollin. And he hired me on the spot. He did what's called a direct hire. And he's a special agent in charge of the West Coast. And he did what was called a direct hire, which is they never do. They're loud, but they never do that. And he put me because of why I was there and because of my background, he put me at the highest position that a special agent can attain. And normally that position and is the field agent on the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. Mm-hmm. Because the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, OCDF, it is a accumulation of one or two agents from every agency. And it's run by the DEA and the United States Attorney's Office. I had never even been a federal agent. I had never even been to any of their schools. I never even had a single federal arrest. and he put me at the highest position that you can put in that office. And there was like 25 other special agents in that office. Some of the guys, very, very good agents, had, 12, 15 years in, and they should have been in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And here he picks this. They called me a rookie. They picked me and put me on that position, and nobody could ever figure out why. Why would the special agent in charge? He's off the street. He didn't do. He was a state trooper. He's never done any federal work.
Right.
He's never even been to any of our schools.
Right.
And he put me at that highest position. But Ray Tipton was at my office one day, and we knew we were getting close. We knew that the boats were coming back in. We already knew that Russia had pulled out of Afghanistan on the 15th. So General Brennan had pulled the trigger, had pulled the plug on that, and they were leaving. So we were now able to do what we needed to do, which was interdict that load of narcotics. And that final payment of over $50 million would not be made to them. They thought they had that money in their pocket because the first load came through, and you'll read about that too. I watched the first load come through. We couldn't do anything because they were still in Afghanistan. But they pulled the Russian army out of Afghanistan on May 15th. Calvin didn't get back into San Francisco until May 23rd. And that night we thought we had 2 or 3 hours because we had intercepted radio transmission from the Intrepid Venture to his sister and said that he would be in about another 4 or 5 hours. He was lying on the radio. He did that just in case somebody would be watching for him, but he was way ahead of schedule. He was hoping he was going to slip in before anybody got out there to look for the time when he was supposed to be coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't catch him coming in, then you don't have that nexus of the border and you can't do the search. So I've got to watch him cross that international border, come into the United States. And then that gave me the authorization to tear his boats apart, literally tear his boats apart. So anyway, Ray took a phone call. Ray got paged, and he called back over to Treasure Island, Hubert Bueno Island, where the Coast Guard facility was. And he yelled real loud. Yelled real loud. I said, what? The Intrepid, the Cape Romaine, which is the Coast Guard cutter out of San Francisco, Cape Romaine.
Mm-hmm.
He said they got information that Robinson's only like an hour out instead of being like 3 or 4 hours out. He's only an hour out. And Cape Romaine's got to leave Treasure Island now so they can get to the Golden Gate Bridge by the time he gets there. I yell at Ray, you tell them they can't leave until you and I get there. So Ray and I took out of my office. We're running across the street to the parking garage. I told Ray, I said, stay on my 6. I'm a former, not only state trooper, but a driving instructor. I told Ray, I said, you stay right on my butt. We're not stopping for anybody. So we go shooting down the Embarcadero in San Francisco. We're running 70, 80 miles an hour. And I have I'm driving a Mustang, and he's got a Dodge Diplomat. And we get San Francisco police starts chasing us. We had 3 San Francisco police cars after us as we're running through town and running, the wrong way on one-way streets and stuff, anything to get there. And I told Ray, we're not stopping. So he's right on my butt. And I look in my rear view mirror, and they even try to cut us off, and we dodge around them. And Ray's got his badge up, and he's trying to hold that badge up and drive. So they'll see,
like, hey, look at that.
They'll see that we're cops, but they don't see that. But we get up on the Bay Bridge, and we go shooting across the Bay Bridge, and the 3 San Francisco PD cruisers stop right there as we get up on the bridge. They were not going to go across. So they radioed ahead to Oakland, said, hey, we got a couple maniacs coming across. One's in a Mustang, brown Mustang, and another one is in a white Diplomat, and they're screaming.
Right.
Well, we get off halfway. Treasure Island's halfway across that Bay Bridge. So Oakland radios back later on and said, well, they never showed up. Well, we got off at Treasure Island. So we go running down there. We finally get down there. Cape Romaine is pulled away from the dock, but they got a couple fast craft there waiting on us. So we dive onto those fast craft, and we start screaming towards Golden Gate Bridge. And Ray looks at me and goes, this is like an effing movie. I said, yeah, it's just like an effing movie. So anyway, we get to the San Francisco Bridge just when we see the boats coming.
Whoa.
I am directly underneath Golden Gate Bridge when I stop those vessels.
Y'all don't have like a radio channel where you can go like, hey, police, it's also the police, like, calm down. You can't like call them off or anything?
No.
Dude, that's nuts.
I called sector. Now, when I'm talking on the radio in San Francisco, I'm actually talking to Los Angeles.
Right.
I'm talking to sector.
Okay.
Sector, this is Alpha. And I give him my number. I said, call San Francisco PD, give them the descriptions, our 2 cars, tell them to disregard, stop the pursuit. But, that takes minutes.
Sure, yeah,
right? That takes time. And we probably got on Bay Bridge. It probably didn't take us 5 minutes to get on there running.
That's great.
70 miles an hour down the Embarcadero.
When you say fast track,
lights.
is that like a fast boat? Is that kind of?
Yes, they're fast craft.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not what you would see like Miami Vice type stuff. No, it's not that. It's a different. If you look up the Coast Guard patrol vessels, I think they're listed as patrol vessels. They call them their fast boats, and they run really well.
How do you stop a boat? Do you just roll up on it and like, hey, police, on a megaphone? Well,
when you got the Cape Romaine there, which is a Coast Guard cruiser,
right,
and that thing is, I think it's 278 feet long.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge. I mean, it's like a battleship, and it turns on its blue lights.
Oh yeah, that's a problem.
Blue lights, and they stop, and we pull up close to the to the Intrepid Venture, and with the bullhorn, we tell them to assemble on the fantail. We're boarding their craft. The captain stays up. Calvin Robinson, he stayed up in the wheelhouse, but all the crew, which was 5 boys, and it was his son, his nephew, his stepson, and his and 2 nephews, and they got on the back of the Intrepid Venture.
Okay.
So I went on to the boat
mm-hmm.
with Ray and an armed boarding party from the Coast Guard, and I went up into the wheelhouse, and Calvin turned white when he saw me because I'd talked to him twice when I was undercover.
Yeah.
And he looked at me, and I'm sure he recognized me because he turned as white as a sheet of paper. I said, Mr. Robinson, I'm Special Agent Norman Wood. I said, we're going to take you to Yerba Buena Island. We're going to search you and your vessels and your crew. And if it may take a little while, but if we don't find anything, we'll have you on your way as soon as possible. Took 8 hours.
Found something.
Took 8 hours.
Right.
Took 8 hours, and we almost didn't pull it off.
Where was it hidden?
Hidden down in the barge. And what I couldn't tell everybody is that I had been down in the barge a couple of different times.
Mm-hmm.
I would go in there. I'd swim across my wetsuit. I'd swim across out to the boats. I'd get on the boats even when they were on the boat sleeping, and I would go down and look and see what work they did. I had NVGs, so I would go down into the hull of the barge, and it's all in the books.
Wow.
But anyways, I would look and see where they were and what they were actually doing. So I knew what they were doing inside that barge. And they had that barge was 120 feet long and is like 40 feet wide.
Right.
And they had it set up like a fuel barge. So that way it would prevent anybody from cutting into it. You wouldn't want to cut into it.
Blow up.
You'd blow up all of San Francisco. And so anyway, so they were trying to take the bolts off of the wall hatches, and there was 56 welded bolts. They not only had the bolts on, they welded those. They tack welded every one of those bolts. So the Coast Guard had 2 teams, one on each end of that barge, and they were trying to work their way towards the middle. Well, 8 hours went by, and we'd only got access to one compartment.
Mm-hmm.
The assistant special agent, Rollin wasn't there. Rollin was out of the country. And Pat Sheridan, Paul Sherman in the book, and we ended up being good friends. But he was such a pain in the ass. He was one of those by the book guys.
Right.
And it just not my style.
Sure.
But anyway, so Pat came over to me and said, we got to turn him loose. It's been 8 hours. We can't hold him any longer. I said, Pat, we turn him loose. We'll never see them people again. I said, and I'm telling you, there's drugs in that barge. And the other assistant special agent in charge, or he was a supervisor, Harry Waskowitz, he said, Norm, there's no effing drugs in that barge. So anyway, so they get a hold of Alio Bergnera. And Alio Bergnera was just a great guy. And when I first got to San Francisco, I'd walk down the hall, and I was never in the office anyways, because I always had long hair. And, you know, I was working in the vineyards. I was out there trimming vines. My forearms were like that big from using those pruners.
Lord.
I mean, that was my cover.
Right.
That was my cover.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I'd walk through the office. I'd have dirty clothes on and stuff, and hair's long. And Alio would just, hey, Hillbilly. He always called me Hillbilly.
I was going to say, did West Virginia come into play any?
What's
like,
that?
I was gonna say, did like people ever pick on you from being?
Oh hell yeah!
Oh yeah!
Oh hell yeah!
Okay.
Oh hell yeah! You'll read about it. And anyways, Alio would say, "Hey Hillbilly, you wearing shoes today?" And I just flip him the bird, just chuckle, and I was busy. I didn't have time for Alio. One day Alio said, "Hey Hillbilly, you wearing shoes today?" And it just pissed me off. Just caught me in the wrong mood. I walked back to his office. I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, I got shoes on, but hillbillies can kick your butt with or without shoes. What would you like?"
That's right.
And that was the last time he ever said that to me.
Let's go.
But anyways, that night of the drug bust, and they were going to send guys back over to the brig to release Calvin and his crew.
Right.
They were going to send Alio and Paul Solito. And anyways, so I walked up to Alio. I said, and it's only a 5-minute drive.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Alio, you got to trust me." I said, "Drive slow." Yeah, I said, "Just trust me, drive slow." So he goes, "Okay, Hillbilly." So anyway, so he gets in the car and him and Paul leave, and I go find Ray. I said, "Ray, got to find me the lieutenant for the Coast Guard who's in charge of the search." Because I couldn't tell people anything.
Sure.
Because what I had done, it's kind of a little iffy.
Sure.
At times. So anyway, so I went in there and we found the lieutenant, and I said, "Lieutenant, can you cold drill?" He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, Can you drill a hole in that barge, deck that barge, keep spraying WD-40 on it so nothing hot drops down there in case you think it's fuel down below. But I'm telling you, it's not fuel. He has 6 fuel tanks in that barge. I had seen all 6 of those fuel tanks.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell him how I knew, except Ray said, "Listen, Lieutenant, you need to listen to him. He knows what he's talking about." He goes, "So you're saying the barge is not full of fuel?" I said, "No." He goes, "Well, what's down there?" I said, "Probably about 50 tons of narcotics." He looked at me like, "Wow, you what?" And Ray goes, "Lieutenant, you really need to listen to him." So anyway, so the lieutenant says, "Yeah." So he goes, "All right, we'll drill it." He gets up, he grabs a couple of Coast Guard guys, tells them, "Go get a drill and a 1/2-inch drill bit." And we had to drill 2 holes. One hole you'd shine the flashlight down through, and the other hole you'd look through and see what's down in the compartment.
Sure.
So this took about, I would say, probably 10 minutes to get the first hole drilled because it's 3/4 plate steel on that deck. So they drilled that first one, and they just starting to drill that second one. They broke the bit. Fortunately, that the Coast Guard man had grabbed another bit. Mm-hmm. So he swapped the bits out, started drilling again,
mm-hmm.
and he busted through that second hole. And that lieutenant got down on his knees, shined his flashlight through that one hole and looked down through the other. He looked up at me and had a great big grin on his face. So I looked down there and you could see the cardboard boxes. That was the marijuana. It was 13 tons of Thai marijuana.
Wow.
And the next compartment up was the 46 tons of hashish. So anyway, so I call Sheridan over, and Pat looks in there, and I said, "Pat, can I make the call?" He goes, "Yeah, make the call." So I run back in the lieutenant's office, tell the secretary to call the brig for me, and she calls the brig, hands me the phone, and they answer, and I said that the special agents got there, and they said, "They're just arriving." Hell, Alio would have made that in 5 minutes. It was like 20 minutes later.
Mm-hmm.
So he really, really did me a big favor. He just took his time. And he got on the phone. He goes, I said, "Alio." He goes, "Hey, Hillbilly." I said, "Don't release them. Read them their rights." He goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, we've got narcotics."
Do you get an adrenaline dump when you find it? Like, I just imagine you're like, "Oh, yes, let's go." Because, I mean, it's not every day you find 50 tons of...
Well, yeah, I guess, but I knew it was going to be there.
Right.
I already knew that it was there, and because I had been watching those people for almost 2 years.
See, that's my problem.
I'd go drinking with their crew members. I'd dance with the girls at the bars. We were all drunk,
Dude.
I tried to get a job.
Did you ever feel bad because of that?
No.
Did you ever feel bad of like, man, I really like that guy, even though he's like a massive drug dealer, and I got to bust him?
Well, he was bringing in 56 tons of narcotics.
Right. Yeah.
56 tons. I'm not talking about 5 ounces.
Right.
I'm talking about you couldn't have got it all in this house.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, look at the pictures on that dock. It takes up the entire dock.
That's why I would be the worst at that job. I mean, everybody has their own place in the world, but I'm like, oh man, we had such good times. We was kind of,
Well, the crew members, the people that were on, that's another part of their story.
Right.
The crew members, I knew the mother of one of them, who was the ex-wife of Calvin.
Oh, really?
She had wrote some letters that came out in November of 79 when I was actually back at the training center. And Buddy called me into his office and he showed me a letter. I said, oh my God, who wrote that? Because up to that point, it was totally quiet.
Sure.
Nobody knew what I was doing. I was off running. Only Buddy and Roland Klink and another guy, Jack in the book. He knew what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
He worked for the agency. He was clandestine service. But anyway, so these letters showed up. And this was this was like almost the third week of December, because we graduated, I think it was on the 31st of December of that year. And Buddy said, you got to find out who that is. We got to shut him up. Or, we don't know where all these letters went to. I said, who got this letter? He goes, the CIA. The agency got this letter. And whoever sent those letters, we assumed they went everywhere. And they did. They did. That's so amazing. So anyways, so I graduate. I get back and I know pretty much, and I'm the only one. I'm the only one that really knows that organization, because I'd been working them for almost a year at that point. And I had already talked to Calvin previously. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to put together who hated Calvin so bad they would write that letter. Who really wanted to bury Calvin. And I thought it was Don Kessel. Mm-hmm. Don was the husband of Ilis Kessel. Ilis was the former wife of Calvin Robinson, who was in charge of everything. He was the head smuggler. He's the one I got out of prison after 31 years. He was dying of cancer.
Wow.
Yeah, the letter I wrote to the federal judge is in the back of the Thorn.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's in the back of Thorn. But anyways, so I thought it was probably Don Kessel. I never thought it would be Ilis, because her son was involved as part of the crew. And I didn't think she would write those letters, because it would maybe send him to prison once they were all arrested.
Right. I
didn't think Ilis would do that. So I was looking and I started in Hayward, California. I started in Hayward, in Pittsburgh, all of the San Mateo, San Jose, all of those southern Bay areas of the general San Francisco Bay Area. And I worked myself north. I could not find anybody that had the checking account of Don and Ilis Kessel. Could not find it. So one of the letters, and these letters were postmarked all around the country, but one of them was postmarked in Longview, Washington. So I thought, well, I'm going to go to Longview. Got to go to Longview. So I go to Longview, and I'm not kidding. It had been now almost 3 months that I've been doing this. I would go to like 6-7 banks a day, and I had on the spot subpoena power. I would show the branch manager my ID. I said, I need to know if you have the checking account of Don and Ilis Kessel. I said, that's all I need to know. And if you do, then I'll write you a subpoena that I want to look at their signature card. Because one of the letters that was sent to the Napa County Drug Task Force, these were all typed letters. You can't match up typing, right?
Sure.
It's extremely hard. But this one letter that went to Chris Dern, he was a Napa County Sheriff's Department. He was one of the detectives on their task force. And I knew Chris, and I stopped in one day. And I asked him if he got one of those letters. He goes, yeah. He goes, I got one of those letters. And he goes, yeah, I got it in the drawer. He goes, international drug smuggling. I'm a deputy sheriff. Nothing I can do about it. So he had just shoved it in file 13. He pulled it out and handed it to me. And on the bottom of it, it said, please do something. Somebody had written, please do something.
Wow.
That's as good as a signature.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I knew the handwriting, and I had looked at that please do something so many times. And that letter, it actually went to the California Tax Department, and the California Tax Department, since those people were from Napa area, they had sent it to the Napa County Sheriff's Office, and it ended up with Chris. And then when I was talking to Chris gave it to me. So I had a signature or writing. It was as good as a signature. So I knew what the handwriting looked at. So I started going through all of the San Francisco Bay Area and working myself north in California. And I ended up all the way up in Washington State and up in Longview. And I went to all these banks. Nobody knew Don or Ilis Kessel. And then I went to this one bank, and the branch manager was a man. And I said, I'm looking for the accounts of Don and Ilis Kessel. He goes, well, they don't have accounts here. He goes, but I remember Don. He goes, I'd met him one time. He goes, I think he moved to Spokane, Washington.
Oh, yeah.
So I go to Spokane, Washington, and I start doing the same thing. And on the third day, I go to this one bank, and it's a woman who is the branch manager. And I show my ID. I said, I need to know if you have the checking accounts of Don and Ilis Kessel. Yeah, I do. I said, wonderful. I said, I'm doing an investigation. They may not have anything to do with it, but I just need to see Don's signature card. She brought me out Don's signature card. It wasn't the correct handwriting. I'm like, damn it. I just spent 3 months. Looking for something, and I didn't find it. And then I'm thinking, I need to at least look at Ilis's. I said, bring me Ilis's signature card. But I didn't think it'd be the mom because she'd be ratting on her son.
Mm-hmm.
She brought me Ilis's signature card, and sure enough, it was Ilis Kessel.
Oh, no way.
It was Ilis Kessel. So anyways, I said, nah, it's not her either. I said, could you, you got a telephone number and address for them just for my report, and I got to get back to San Francisco. She goes, sure. She'll give me that information. So I get in the car, and I look on my map. I find that address, and I go find the house. And I'm sitting in front of the house. I call the number, and Ilis answers, and she was like a 50-year 50-year smoker voice. What you want? I said, this is Special Agent. No, I told her Tony Davis. This is Special Agent Tony Davis, and I need to talk to you. And she goes, well, I don't think we got anything to talk about. I said, well, it's about the letters that you wrote about the drug smuggling operation. And she goes, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, on the one you wrote, please do something to the California State Tax Department. And I just matched your signature card at the bank. And I said, you're the one that wrote that letter. She just went quiet. So I'm waiting. I'm watching the house. I'm expecting her to come bolting out of that house and going for a car. And of course, I'd arrested her. She wouldn't have got anywhere.
Right.
And she goes, okay. She goes, I live in such and such a place. I said, I know. I'm sitting in your driveway. She goes, well, come on in. So I went on in, and you'll read all about it. But anyways, that's how I found out who wrote those letters. And I ended up taking her back to San Francisco, and we documented her as a confidential informant, SF713. And I put $200,000 in her purse, and I take her back, put her on a plane, fly her back to Spokane.
Wow.
That's how that works.
$200,000.
$200,000.
I mean, that's a good deal. I mean, for 56 tons or whatever, I mean, that's a pretty good deal.
Oh, yeah, because that was worth.
I mean,
that was worth
billions. I don't know. Not billions, but
no. Seriously, street value was over $1 billion.
Really? Wow, dude.
Yeah, at the trial, DEA testified if broken down into dosage units, that 56 tons was enough to make every man, woman, and child in the United States high.
That is insane.
That's how much drugs there were.
Was you ever in a situation where you was like wearing a wire where someone could have just pulled out a gun and shot you?
Well, hell yeah.
How did you? I mean, I can see how, like, your personality. I can see how you'd stay calm, but me, there's no way. You'd
be chummed.
Yeah, there's no way.
That's why we call it. They'd cut you up in little pieces.
I just be like, hey guys, just so you know, I got like this thing on. You know, it's not no big deal. Yeah,
I used to work the girls in the Mark. If we needed somebody to do a buy for us, I'd go to the Mark and I'd work the girls. I'd work the working girls, and I would sit there at the bar, and I'd always use the same lines, and I'd have two other agents there. Usually it was a lot of times it's Alio and the other girl, female agent, Kit Welsh was her name, doll baby. And so anyways, I sat there at the bar, and eventually, working girl would come in here and she would sit next to me, and we just small talk, and would you like a drink? Sure, I'll buy her a drink, whatever. And I could work with it.
Right.
If they laughed, I said, seriously, I said, if you want to make some money, I can make you a whole lot more money than what you're going to get, $500. She goes, well, how? I said, you need to make a buy for me. She goes, you a cop? I said, yeah, kind of, a little bit. And the ones that we would work with, and we'd take them upstairs, we'd have to strip search them, we'd have to put a wire on them. do the cavity search, the female agent, everything. I mean, we did a complete search and wired her up and take her to wherever we wanted to buy. And she'd go in and make the buy and come back out. And we take her back to the hotel. We'd strip her again and make sure there's nothing else. And, you know, that's the way we did it.
What a life that you've had. Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking about all these different lifetimes. And I've had a few lifetimes, but all of them are just like, compared to this, kindergarten boring. Like just like you're like the New York Yankees level of life's lived, and it's just so fascinating. And I appreciate you coming in here. You'll have to come back. I mean,
sure.
we got 7 podcasts.
You're a good guy to talk to.
There we go. Let's go. Well, tell people you started a podcast, so let them know where they can find you.
I started a podcast. People's been after me for quite some time to do a podcast, and so I started one here a couple weeks ago. It's called No BS with Dr. Wood, and it's on YouTube.
What a perfect name!
And I just released my second one on Sunday night. And I don't like the audio on them, but I just got my new microphone today, so the audio will be good. I was using a boom mic on the camera, and I just didn't like the quality.
Heck yeah.
Well, so anyway, so I got a good mic now, and I've checked it, and the quality is excellent.
Good deal. If I can help technically, just holler anytime. But yeah, and y'all look in the description. We got the links to Thorn and Red Sword, the 2-book series, packed full of stories that I'm definitely going to dive into. It takes me now audiobook. That's more my speed because I'm so ADHD. But I just throw them on and work out.
Oh, it's excellent.
That'll be perfect.
It's excellent. Yeah, start with Red Sword. And that way you can go through Red Sword and Thorn, Checkmate, President Said Kill Him. And then the last one I wrote as kind of like a self-help book for women to explain how men really are. And it's all about men.
Good deal.
Name of the book, All About Men.
Well, how cool, man. Well, thank you for being here, sir. We'll have to do this again. Everyone out there, be sure to follow Dr. Wood's work. Dr. Wood, Undercover Wood, Detective Tony Davis. How many names did you end up having? How did you come up with that name?
Well,
do they let you pick the name?
That name was actually selected for me.
Oh, okay. They picked your name for you.
That actually, here.
What is this? Let's go. It's your drive. Is this legit? Like this would work if you go in to buy beer?
No, that's a real Oregon driver's license.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Tony Lee Davis. Yeah, that's the second license, but the first one.
That's awesome.
The first one was same thing.
Yeah.
My hair was just a little bit longer than the first one.
Dude, that's so cool. Well, how awesome. I've learned a lot today. Everyone out there, before you leave, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Creepalachia on YouTube if you haven't. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, take a minute, leave a review. That'll really help the show be found. And we are on Patreon now. If you like fictional creepy stories, I do them exclusively there too. And if you want to get your name in the credits, you can do that as well. But everyone else, always remember, above all else, this was a freaking cool episode, and long live Appalachia.